Welcome to this video, which is an introduction to ANOVA, or analysis of variance. Let's begin. After watching this video, you should be able to state what ANOVA stands for, define and identify explanatory and response variables, and state when it is appropriate to use ANOVA. ANOVA stands for analysis of variance. Notice that the A and the N come from the word analysis, and both the V and the A come from the word variance, so it's kind of a fake or forced acronym. This statistical method serves as a comparison of quantitative data among several, meaning more than two groups. That means that you can use it as a comparison among 3 or 4 or 5 or more groups. Let's look at a few examples to see if ANOVA would be appropriate test. Remember, the two requirements we are looking for are, number 1, the response variable must be quantitative, and number 2, we must be comparing at least 3 groups. So let's review explanatory and response variables. The explanatory variable is also sometimes called the independent variable or the X variable. It's the variable that is thought to explain, predict, or influence another variable. This is often a variable over which direct control can be exerted. The response variable is also called the dependent variable or the Y variable, and it's a variable that is thought to depend on an explanatory variable. So let's do a few examples and get practice and refresh our memory on how to identify these. So here's our first example. An elementary school student designs an experiment to find out how sunlight affects the growth of plants. So take a minute, pause this video, and determine what is the explanatory variable and what is the response variable. Well, the amount of sunlight is the explanatory variable. Remember, this is the variable that you have direct control or influence over. You can artificially move the plant, assuming it's in a pot and not planted in the ground, and control the amount of sunlight. You cannot directly control the growth of the plant. You can only see how the growth of the plant responds to the amount of sunlight the plant is given. So the growth of the plant is the response variable. Let's do another example. A teacher wants to know if playing classical music results in better test grades. What is the explanatory variable and what is the response variable? So the music is the explanatory variable. Remember, this is the variable that you have direct control over. The teacher can control whether or not she plays music or he plays music in his or her classroom. Okay, the teacher cannot directly control the test grades. They can only record the test grades and see how or if the music influences those grades. So again, the music is the explanatory variable. The test grades would be the response variable. Last but not least, a consumer wants to know which type of auto insurance is cheapest. What is the explanatory variable and what is the response variable? So the type of auto insurance would be the explanatory variable. So again, you have direct control over this. You can choose, usually, right, who you give your business to. Who do you pay for auto insurance? You don't have control over how much they charge you. That's why we have, in this capitalistic society, right, we have competition so that we can choose the auto insurance that's going to give us the best insurance for the lowest price. So again, the type of auto insurance, the brand of auto insurance, will be the explanatory variable. It's the one that we have direct control over. The response variable in this case would be the cost of the auto insurance. So now that we've reviewed explanatory and response variables, let's do some examples to determine if ANOVA is an appropriate test. So Sarah just got her driver's license and is shopping for auto insurance. She wants to know which of the 5 insurance companies offers the least expensive coverage. So we just kind of talked about this. So remember, the first thing is that the response variable, not the explanatory variable, but the response variable has to be quantitative. In this case, the explanatory variable is the insurance company. That is a categorical or qualitative variable, right? Because it's a label. So like if I use State Farm or if I use USAA, that's a label. Okay, but it doesn't matter that that's qualitative, right? Because what I care about is not the explanatory variable, but the response variable. And the response variable is the price or the cost of coverage, which is a quantitative variable. So therefore, this metric is met. My response variable is quantitative, so I can continue on to test the other metric. So the other thing that needs to be true is that I am observing 3 or more populations. So Sarah is comparing the cost of 5 different insurance companies. That's more than 3. So far, with the information we're given, it seems like ANOVA would be an appropriate test to perform. So let's do another example. Jennifer works at a store which sells 7 different brands of medicine. She wants to know which brand works best at controlling eczema. So first of all, is the response variable quantitative? So the explanatory variable is the brand of medicine. Again, this is a label, it's categorical or qualitative, but that's okay because we don't really care about the explanatory variable. What we want to know is what is the response variable. So the response variable is how well this medicine is going to control eczema. So take a minute, pause this video and think about, is the efficacy of this medicine, how well it controls eczema, is that a quantitative variable? What do you think? Well, I would argue that it's not. If somebody asked me that, I would think of it as a label, right? So it's like very effective, somewhat effective, not effective at all. You could try to force this into some sort of quantitative measure, but as it stands, as it is stated, it feels much more qualitative to me, right? We're literally measuring the quality of the medicine, right? Not any particular quantity associated with it. So, of course, as soon as we know that one of these metrics is not met, one of these qualifications, we can stop. But just for the sake of practice, because we're just learning about ANOVA and when it's appropriate, let's just practice looking at the other requirement. So the other requirement is that we're looking at 3 or more populations. So in this case, it says that the store sells 7 different brands of medication. So even though we're looking at 7 different populations or 7 different samples, it doesn't matter because the response variable is not quantitative. So since we failed to meet both of these requirements, I would say that ANOVA is not appropriate. Okay, let's do one more. Jared purchased 2 different brands of light bulbs. He wants to know which brand of light bulb will last the longest. So again, the first thing that I'm going to look at is the response variable quantitative? So of course the explanatory variable is the brand of light bulb, right? I can control which brand of light bulb I buy when I go to the store. What I cannot directly control or influence is how long that light bulb lasts. So the response variable is the lifetime, right? The length of time the light bulb lasts. That is quantitative because time is a measure, right? So I can check off this requirement. And then the other requirement is, are we looking at 3 or more populations? But as you can see, Jared's only looking at 2 different brands. So yes, you could technically do ANOVA, but as we will see in future slides, it's not the best way or the most efficient way. So since we're only looking at 2 samples, ANOVA would probably not be the best approach for this example. So now that you've watched this video, you should be able to state what ANOVA stands for. Just in case you forgot in the last 5 minutes, it stands for Analysis of Variance. You should be able to define and identify explanatory and response variables. So remember, your explanatory variable, also known as your independent variable or sometimes your X variable, is a variable that is thought to explain, predict, or influence another variable and is often, not always, but often a variable over which direct control can be exerted. The response variable, also known as the dependent variable or the Y variable, is a variable that is thought to depend on the explanatory variable. Last but not least, you should be able to state when it is appropriate to use ANOVA. And the 2 things that we're looking for, one is that the response variable is quantitative, and the other thing is that we're comparing 3 or more samples.